In today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast, I answer all of the questions that you guys have sent in for today's edition of the Locked On Pistons Mailbag. Again, why I answer all of your guys' questions. Get ready for today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Johnson with 1 second to go.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So like I said in the introduction, I'm going to be answering all the questions that you guys have sent in. If you guys want to be featured on the next Mailbag podcast, you guys simply can tweet at me, hashtag Mailbag a question. You guys can DM me. You guys can comment in one of the YouTube sections. Just make sure you put hashtag Mailbag so I know, so I know that it is a question for the Mailbag. So if you guys don't hear a question today, you guys want to hear your question answered in the next podcast, again, those are the best ways to do so. Before we get into any of the questions, we do have just a tiny update on Cade Cunningham. Dwayne Casey didn't really give us much to go off of. Just basically let us know that he's on track with what they want and that they have a ton of people working with him to make sure he's completely all the way there and is going to get all the way back to 100%. Didn't really give us an idea of if he's, when he says on track, is that 3 games he's going to come back or is he going to be out for longer? Me personally, reading the quote, it kind of makes me think that he might be out a little bit longer than originally thought, but that's all we got with Cade, just that he's on track with whatever they want him to be on with, and they have a lot of people working with him. So, I don't know. I thought he was going to return against the Sacramento Kings on Sunday, but I'm starting to think that maybe, and really this is, like I said, you could go either way with the quote. It doesn't really reveal anything, but just I feel like if he was closer to returning, he would have been more definitive on it. I feel like he's kind of leaving it open, just like they did last year, because they don't know exactly when he'll be back actually. So based on how they did this last year, I'm going to assume he'll probably be out a little bit longer than I originally expected. But that's the update with Cade Cunningham. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into answering some of you guys' questions. And there's a few really interesting questions you guys sent in. There's a few ones that actually would be really fun, like entire podcast episodes. Like just based off that question, I could get like 1 or 2 guests on, and we could do like a little fantasy draft. You guys will see what I'm talking about. But it's a super cool question. I'm going to save that for a little bit later. But the first one I want to answer, this one is coming from Return of the Bad Boys. He says, how many of Troy Weaver's first-round draft picks that he's drafted do you see being traded before we become a playoff team, and who do you think they are? So I've told you guys many times on the podcast that I do not think that this team right here is the team the Pistons will have when they're competing. I don't think that's a hot take at all. They're the worst defensive team in the league. They have major gaps in spacing and outside shooting, individual talent. This is not the complete team right here. So I've been one to say that I could see multiple trades happening, multiple guys leaving. I wouldn't be surprised if only 3 guys that are on this roster right now are here in 2 years. Like, I wouldn't be surprised about that at all. However, the difference between this question and what I've been saying is I'm talking about competing for, like, maybe not championship contention, but like moving past the first round, maybe possibly moving past the second round, that kind of stuff. This one is just based on become a playoff team, so they could squeak in as the 8th, 7th, 6th seed. So how many of the first round picks do I think could be on the team when the Pistons try to do something like that, or they eventually do something like that? I think that there's a good chance. Obviously, Cade. I think Jay Ivey will be around. I think Jalen Durham will be around. I think the questions are Saddiq Bey, Isaiah Stewart, and Killian Hayes. And if I had to take my best guess, and when the Pistons are becoming a playoff team, again, not a high seed, but simply maybe an 8th seed, or maybe they make it to the play-in and then squeak in as the 8th seed, something like that, I think there's a very good chance that only one of them will be gone, and that's Killian Hayes. I think there's a very good chance that Saddiq and Stu will be still on the team when the Pistons eventually just simply squeak in as a playoff team. And there's probably a decent chance that Killian Hayes will be on that team too, especially with how he's playing recently, if that's an actual corner that he's turned. But I think that Saddiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart have I feel like they both have kind of carved themselves a role with this team to where maybe I could see them being moved down the line for a bigger star or packaged in a deal for a star. But I could also see them still on the team when they eventually make the playoffs. Killian Hayes, on the other hand, is a little bit more of an unknown still. And even if he starts to turn the corner a little bit, we've talked about on the podcast before that I could see the future where Killian just doesn't want to come back, or maybe the Pistons don't want to bring him back, even if he is getting better, because most of the times, guys with high expectations, even if they are like fine players, let's say Killian becomes a fine player, if they don't reach those high expectations they had, they usually aren't appreciated with that team, and both parties decide to just move on. Usually you see them get appreciated on the second team. So we've talked about that many times before with Killian Hayes. So if I had to take a guess of how many would be here, I think all of them except Killian Hayes. That would be my final guess when the Pistons eventually do make the playoffs. The next question kind of goes off that a little bit. I just lost it. Where'd it go? I always be losing it. Oh, right here. This one is from Peak Leggy Sports. He says, "Who do you want for the next 10 years on this team? Isaiah Livers or Sadiq Bey?" Lots of angles to look at this, especially with fit. So listen, I know we've talked about fit a lot with Isaiah Livers in the starting lineup opposed to Sadiq Bey. But if you're talking long term, who you'd rather keep, I think it's obviously having to be Sadiq Bey, because Sadiq Bey is just more talented. He's better than Isaiah Livers, even though Isaiah Livers does some things I think would fit better as a fifth option with some starters. That doesn't mean that he's actually better than Sadiq Bey. And not only do you want the better player long term, you also probably would like the better player because you can use him in trades. I've said many times on the podcast that if the Pistons do eventually go to swing for a star, it's going to have to be Sadiq Bey that goes out there and is probably the main core piece to a trade for a star. When you get stars, you don't just give up trash for a star. You have to have a core piece that other teams like. And I don't think the Pistons are going to want to give up Cade, obviously. I don't know if Jaden Ivey would be involved in it. Maybe Jalen Duren or Jaden Ivey, depending on the star, but I don't think so. So I think Sadiq Bey would be the guy included in one of those packages if they do something like that. So all those reasons combined, I think it's easily Sadiq Bey. If you want to ask me who fits better with the starting lineup right now, all that kind of stuff, I'd say Isaiah Livers. But again, that doesn't mean Isaiah Livers is actually better than Sadiq Bey. It just means I think he fits better with the team right now in that starting lineup if you wanted to do that. But yeah, I'm taking Sadiq Bey long-term next 10 years because of the flexibility that comes with that. When we come back, we'll answer even more of you guys' questions. We got a ton more. We got about 13 more questions, I believe, that you guys sent in just on the Twitter. So we'll get to all those questions. But before we get into any of that, I have to tell you guys about what this show is brought to you by, and that is BetterHelp. This show and episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at BetterHelp.com/code and get on your way to being your best self. Now, look, unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual. So when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. And trust me, I felt stuck a few years ago too. Before I became the Locked On Pistons host, I felt like I was stuck. I went to college. I had done all kinds of things, but I really felt like I wasn't really furthering myself in my career, and I felt stuck. And, you know, everyone feels like that sometimes. So everybody needs help navigating any of life's challenges can make you feel unsure, whether it's a career change, like I was talking about, it's a new relationship, or becoming a parent. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere, and it's 100% online. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professional, licensed, and vetted therapists available 100% online all the time. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with the therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist at any time. It couldn't be any simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Again, learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. I really appreciate all you guys who have supported the podcast over the past year or so. Really do appreciate all you guys. All right, let's get into some more of these questions. Next question is from Fueled by Motown. He says, "What's your favorite single Pistons win that I have witnessed?" Now, look, I already know I'm gonna get a bunch of comments because I'm young and I didn't get to experience all the going to work days. I don't have much memory of all of it. So when I say this win, everyone's gonna be like, "Oh my god, I feel so bad for you." Blah blah. Yes, yes, yes. I've heard it 1,000 times, but it is what it is, man. I can't help the fact that I'm only 24. Okay, I can't help it. But anyways, my favorite win that I've witnessed watching is by far the Blake Griffin 50-point game against the Philadelphia 76ers. At that moment, I felt like the Pistons actually had a superstar in their jersey for the first time I've ever been watching them, and they did. That season, Blake was absolutely sensational, all NBA third team. And that game, he was just unstoppable. And that was before anyone really believed that he had extended his game to the three-point line. What was the Pistons going to look like? What was he going to look like with the Pistons? That was very early in the season. And he went out there and dropped 50 points on them, hit the game-winning and one layup. It was just it was so amazing to watch, so much fun to watch. And by far, it's my favorite win that I've watched in the Pistons, since watching the Pistons. There's not many games that, rival that because there hasn't been a ton of success and not a lot of fun games like that, at least with a superstar in your uniform. So, I mean, it is what it is, man. I understand that I'm young. It's probably going to be crazy to a lot of you guys get older than me, but that's just is what it is, man. That 50-point game against the 76ers is something that I'll always remember. I remember where I was watching it. I remember multiple plays from it. It was just it was a fantastic game to watch, and Pistons fans everywhere felt like that we had a superstar finally, and it was super dope to watch. Super dope. So that would be my answer right there. Next question is going to be from Detroit Meows. That's a funny name. He says, "What is the best way to handle Cade, Killian, and Jaden in order to get the best growth from all three?" So I think what you first need to understand, and what if I was the GM, if I was the coach, what I would first go at is, and look, sometimes this is unfair, and sometimes some people may say it's not right, but it is what it is. It's a business. This is how you have to go about it. I'd put who's more important on my list. So Cade's obviously the most important. Jaden Ivey's the next, and then Killian falls down that list at 3. So the way I'd look at things is I'd look at it as I need to find the best way to maximize Cade Cunningham first, because Cade Cunningham is the face of the franchise. He's the guy I believe is the future superstar. And if this team is eventually ever going to reach somewhere, it's going to be because Cade Cunningham reached his potential. So very first, it would be, how do I maximize Cade? And the way you maximize Cade is by playing him a lot of minutes with a lob threat and spacing around him. Give him a lot of shooters around him that can consistently make defenses respect him and hit open shots. Give him a lob threat that can finish around the rim, catch lobs, put pressure on the rim, and set good screens. If you do that, I think Cade really goes off. So that would be the first thing I do. So then you go to the next player, and that's Jaden Ivey. Okay, well, if I'm doing that with Cade, how can I fit Jaden Ivey in here to where it's best going to help him as well? Well, I played, obviously, Cade and Jaden next to each other. I make sure that they have shooters. If I'm going to play those two guys together, I need shooters everywhere, not just at the 3 and 4. I might even need one at the 5. And at the 5, it's probably look, this is a topic much farther down the line when the Pistons eventually are like taking that next step. But at the 5, I think the 5 position might need to be the Pistons' third best player. If Cade's their best eventually and Jaden's their second, the 5 might have to be their third best player, because if you're going to play those two guys together, I want a guy who can space the floor, who has an offensive repertoire that can hit outside shots, mid ranges, maybe post up a mismatch, and also set really good screens and finish around the rim. So that if you can find a player like that, he's probably going to be a star. He's probably going to be like an all-star type of player. It's not hard. It's hard for you to find those type of players. But that's what I'm looking for down the line. I need shooters around these guys, and I need an all-star 5 who can really set these screens, play fine defense. I don't need him to be a superstar defensively, but I need him to be fine defensively, protect the rim somewhat, and be able to set hard screens, attack a mismatch if they switch a guard on you, and finish around the rim. That's what I need for those two guys right there. If I'm going from, okay, Cade first, okay, then Jaden. And then also with Jaden, I want to stagger him and Cade a lot because they both need the ball in their hands plenty, I think, moving forward. I know some people think that Jaden can just stay off ball. I think he can play off ball, but I don't think that should be his primary play type. I think his primary play type at his peak should be on ball. It should be a plus that he can play off ball as well, but that doesn't mean you want him off ball the entire time. So I stagger them both a lot throughout games to where they both have the ball in their hands a ton. Are playing again with the same things. You want spacing around them, and you want a decent big guy next to him. And the starting lineup, that's the star you need, I think. They also need a really big wing and a star. We're getting way too far down the line if I keep going through all that. But I'm starting to get to a point where I think the third best player on the Pistons might end up having to be that center position. But anyways, moving forward, then you get to Killian Hayes on the third position. And Killian Hayes at this point, you don't know if he has a future with the team. You don't know you don't know what's going on with them. And you still, though, as a rebuilding team, you want to put these players in the best positions still to develop and eventually prove that they should be a part of your team. But you can't do that. My point is, you can't do that at the cost of someone like Cade or someone at the cost of Jaden Ivey. So that's why he falls. That's why I put them in a ranking and do it by importance. So then I'd look at Killian and I'd say, look, Killian needs the ball in his hands too, but he also needs to learn how to play off ball, which I think he's actually doing a pretty nice job of. And what I would do is Killian Hayes is one of those players I think you can clearly see plays better when he has better players around him. He's not one of those players who are going to play with a bunch of, let me be nice, non-good NBA players, and is going to raise them up to being really good players. That's not what he's going to do. You need to play him around fine NBA players, guys who can hit open shots. So games, it'll look like he has 2 assists. Instead, it'll be like 7 and 8 assists in a game. So you need to play him around good players, give him proper spacing. It's really the same thing with all 3 of them. They need proper spacing, and they need a big guy who can set them nice screens. Killian doesn't need no star or anything. You don't need to be trying, we need to get a star for Killian Hayes. No, you just need to play him with spaced lineups that have functional offensive competence out there. And then the rest of it just falls on Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes has to develop himself. So first 2 guys, there's a bunch of things you can do. Killian Hayes, you just need to hope that he develops himself. He plays with confidence. And then if you want to look at Lambs, play him with other good players. Ever since good players started playing with him on the bench, he's looked a lot better. You can't play him with a bunch of other non-rotational guys and expect him to carry him. It's not going to happen. He's going to play down to their level. And you can criticize that. Obviously, that's not great. But that's just how some NBA players are. If every NBA player raised everyone around them, everyone would be a star. So that's just how it goes. So that's how I look at it with all 3 of those guys. That's a long answer, but I thought getting real detailed with the first 2 really mattered. And then obviously the last part with Killian Hayes. Next question is from Sean on Twitter. It says, in your opinion, should the Detroit Pistons land Victor Wembanyama? Who do you start next to him, Stu or Duren? I think the answer is Duren. I think Duren is the long-term starting center on this team. I think eventually Isaiah Stewart moves to being a backup big guy. I think that's his best position for a competing team down the line. I don't think obviously if you get Wemby, you don't start Stu over Wemby. And Duren is the future center of this team. He's a guy who's going to be able to protect the rim, has great verticality, is a lob threat, sets nice screens. Eventually, he's already showing the potential to be a really nice passer at his position, can operate out of the short roll, and he has potential, it looks like, to extend his game a little bit farther out. And I've seen some people compare him like to a younger Bam Adebayo. So that kind of player, he's your starting 5 moving forward. So by the time next year, I think Jalen Duren will be your starting 5. So if you get Wemby, you play Wemby at the 4, and then Duren at the 5 next one. I don't think that one's too hard. Even though we are, as Pistons fans, starting to reach a little bit with our hope for Victor Wembanyama. But, hey, I'm doing the same thing, man. This season better be worth it. That's all I'm saying. If we're going to go through this season, we better be bringing in Victor Wembanyama. I don't care what has to happen, man. Hey, we need Victor over here. We get Victor, it's tough. Next 10 years is going to be insane. Obviously, there's some other good players, too, in the draft. But, Victor Wembanyama is the prize, man. Everyone knows that. Anyways, next question, and then we'll get to the next ad break. This one's from Age of Crabnose. Says, if we keep Sadiq as a 6-man bucket getter, who do you think is a realistic target for our starting 3 next year? So a guy that we've said multiple times on the podcast, I've had a lot of you guys tweet him at me. Maybe this happens through the draft with, I believe I'm saying his name correctly, Amin Thompson. Maybe with him. But I think the guy, if you're talking about free agency, one of the guys I'm looking at is Cam Johnson, a really nice 3-and-D player, just a straight sniper, has some nice size to him. I think that would be a really good, perfect fit next to Cade and Jaden Ivey. So that's who I'd be looking at. You can target multiple guys throughout the league through trades or whatever. But if you're just talking about through next year's free agency class, the prime name I'm looking at to try to pry from the Phoenix Suns is Cam Johnson. That's what I'm looking at. Another guy I'm looking at, Kelly Oubre Jr. I'd really like Kelly Oubre on this team as well. So those are two of the guys I'd be interested in to keep Sadiq on the bench as the six-man bucket getter guy. But yeah, Cam Johnson's number one on my list with that. When we come back, we're going to answer more of you guys' questions that you guys have sent in. But first, I got to tell you guys about another one of our sponsors. And this one is my favorite sponsor. It's SweatBlock. So last year, SweatBlock became a sponsor for the Locked On Pistons podcast. And they sent me some SweatBlock products. And, for a person like me, listen, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'd be just out there. Well, it doesn't even have to be hot. I don't have to be doing no extraneous activities or anything. I just randomly start sweating. I'm like, dude, this sucks. My shirt's ruined now. Like, bro, this sucks. So I'm like, you know what? Let's try this SweatBlock. So it's simple as this. You go and take a shower, and then after you take a shower, you take the SweatBlock wipes and you wipe underneath your armpits, and it's supposed to work up to 7 days per use. You apply them on a Sunday, and you will stay dry all week. So I went and tried it. I was like, you know what? I've seen a bunch of things like this. Maybe, who knows if it actually will work. I went and did it. A week goes by. I didn't even remember that I put the SweatBlock on. I didn't even notice any sweat because I hadn't sweat all week. That's because SweatBlock absolutely works. It's the best. It's my absolute favorite sponsor for the Locked On Pistons podcast. SweatBlock absolutely works. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, tell them to try SweatBlock. Save 20% with promo code Locked On at sweatblock.com. It's also available on Amazon. I'm telling you guys right now, I am someone who has used it. I am someone who has struggled with the whole just randomly sweating and ruining your outfit to where you're embarrassed to go out now. You're embarrassed to raise your arms wherever you go. Like, I'm one of those people who have dealt with it. And SweatBlock solved it for me. I'm telling you guys, it works. So again, if you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try SweatBlock. Save up to 20% with promo code Locked On at sweatblock.com. You simply wipe the SweatBlock wipes underneath your armpits after taking a shower, and it should work for up to 7 days per use. Again, head to sweatblock.com and use promo code Locked On for 20% off your order. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. It's another great way to support the podcast. All right, let's go ahead and get right back into the mailbag. All right, so this one is from Daniel Jacobitz. I hope I said your name right. If I didn't, I apologize. It says, would you rather keep Sadiq, try to develop him as an excellent bench guy, or try to trade him away for a known commodity? So the only way I trade Sadiq is if he's in a package to get a star. If the Pistons are going after a star and they're willing to now, let's say they somehow, I don't know, let's say they somehow did another deal or something where they got an extra first round pick, maybe with Bojan, or packaging Bojan and Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel or whatever. Let's say they get an extra first round pick. And now they have a first round pick that every team wants. And let's say the Lakers first round pick or something. Let's just say something like that. And now a star becomes available and the Pistons want to go after him. That's the only way I'm trading Sadiq like that. Either that, or if when it's time to pay Sadiq starts coming around and you start hearing that, like, obviously the front office will have a better idea of this, but he starts wanting more money than you are comfortable trading him or paying him for. Then I'd consider trading him before you have to get to that point. But outside of that, the only way I'm trading Sadiq, rather than either keeping him as an excellent bench piece to be a six-man, or if you want to try force him into the starting lineup again, I don't care. The only way I'm trading him is if he's one of the main pieces for a star. Only way. Not just a known commodity like just a regular 3-and-D player, unless the Pistons are at a point where they're like championship contenders and that's what they're missing. Then you do that. But I don't think that it would be at that point. So, yeah, only way I trade Sadiq is if you're going after a star. If that's the case, I 100% trade Sadiq if you're getting that star. If that's all you need to do, if you need to trade Sadiq, maybe another young player, maybe Isaiah Stewart or Killian Hayes, or Killian Hayes doesn't have much trade value. Maybe you can package Sadiq, Stu, and a pick and you get a star. I'm doing it every time, yes. But outside of that, nah, probably not going to do that. Next question is from Detroit Zay. It says, do you think the Pistons get a top 3 pick? We should just pick the best player available? In my opinion, I think we should make a blockbuster type of trade and get a big-time small forward that can defend. So this is the thing. If they get one, no way. You're picking Victor Wembanyama, and there's not even a thought that goes into your head about anything else. As soon as you win the lottery, you might as well just go ahead and ship the jersey to Victor Wembanyama. That's immediate. If you get 2, you get Scoot Henderson, because right now Scoot is considered the generational prospect next to Victor. If it wasn't for Victor, he'd be number 1 in just about any other draft class. He's a generational prospect. From what everyone's saying, you draft Scoot. Now, by the time the draft comes around, if another player emerges that is a better prospect than Scoot, and he's a better generational prospect, you got 3 of them now, then okay, then you draft the other one. But at 1 or 2, you are picking the best player available, either Victor or Scoot, because both of these guys are generational guys. When you are in a rebuild and when you are in a restoration, you're trying to get to a point. You do not pick based off fit. You pick best player available every single time. I'm going to say this quote right here, just like back when when Michael Jordan was being drafted, Trailblazers, I forget who it was that told Trailblazers. I think it was one of Michael Jordan's former coaches. Former coach told them, draft Michael Jordan. You need to draft Michael Jordan. He is the best player in this draft. Draft him. They responded, but we need a center. And he said, then draft Michael Jordan and play him at center. Quite literally, you draft the best player available. Imagine if they would have drafted Michael Jordan, but no, they went the other route because they needed a big guy. Now look at how they look because they went fit over best player available. You never, ever, ever, ever go fit over best player available unless you are like a contender and you desperately need something. It's like pick 15 to 20 or something. At the top of the draft, you do not go fit over best player available ever. Unless it's like super close and you think both guys are just right here and now you can go to fit. If fit can be like your next determining factor. But if the guy is just clearly the best player available, you pick best player available any single time. Now, if the Pistons get the 3rd pick, then I'll entertain a trade that can get you a star. I don't think a team will be willing to give up a star. If they do, it depends what kind of star it is. But at the 3rd overall pick, I'm probably keeping that as well and picking best player available. The Pistons are at a point right now where all their players are 2021. They need another talented guy. They are missing many things on this team. And most importantly, they're missing top-end talent. So if you can add another top-end talent through the draft, you do it every single time, unless you're being offered a trade that just is you can't deny it. And then at that case, sure. But I find the future unlikely that there is a trade out there that is good enough for the Pistons that where they're at in their rebuild, to pass up on getting one of those top 3 picks. If that, I just don't see it. I don't see it. You pick best player available, especially if you get a top 3 pick in a stacked draft like this. You just pick best player available and you figure everything else out later. It's as simple as that to me. Next question is from Inktown. How do you feel about Troy Weaver so far as a GM? How well has he done in drafting, acquiring talent, hiring a coaching staff, getting elite level players, accumulating assets, making trades, bringing us a fun, exciting, entertaining brand of basketball that could be future contenders? I think Troy Weaver has done a fine job. So I had a little mini doc that I did for the Score with one of my friends who works there. We went, me, Bryce, he was in town, and Matt Issa. You guys, for those of you guys that are on Twitter, he does some work with the Basketball News. Either way, we met up. We did like this little round table for their mini doc, and they asked the same question to me. I'm going to tell you guys the same thing I said there. I'm not giving Troy Weaver any time to grade. I'm not judging him all that much until next season, because so far he hasn't been asked to do much. He got the 1st overall pick, clearly Cade. He got the 5th overall pick, and Jaden fell to him. At that time, I wanted Shaedon Sharpe. Shaedon Sharpe looks really good, but Jaden Ivey looks really damn good too. So people will say Jaden Ivey fell to you. That was an easy one too. He hasn't been asked to do anything that will make or break a franchise. He hasn't been asked to do any hard decisions yet. This offseason, though, is when he'll start making decisions that actually matter. So I can't do anything. I can't grade him at all until then. The coaching staff, he hasn't moved on from Dwayne Casey or anything. He's kept Dwayne Casey around. I don't have a problem with that. As far as everything else you asked, getting elite level players, it's not time to get elite level players. I'm not going to be mad at that. The one thing that I'm going to give him a lot of credit on is how he maneuvered the cap situation the Pistons were in, and what he did this past offseason by flipping that pick, that Jeremy Grant. Let me start over. By flipping Jeremy Grant, my God, into that 1st round pick, and then also taking on contracts in Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel that are expiring contracts basically because they have team options on them, and it doesn't look like Nerlens Noel will be this, but Alec Burks definitely looks like he may be a guy you can also flip at the deadline. And if not, you can just decline his option and you have that cap space open. So you were able to take on contracts that keep your cap space wide open while also adding another guy who was on your top 5 board in Jalen Duren. That was amazing how he was able to do that. So I give him credit for that, but everything else, I don't think that he's really done anything worthy of being judged yet. So I'm going to wait till next offseason to really talk about Troy Weaver's job so far as the Pistons GM. We have a few other questions, but we're running a little bit longer. I'll start going a little bit faster here. As of now, who would you prefer, Wemby or Scoot? This question is from Aaron Poison Ivy. I say Wemby, easy. It's not even a thought. You pick Wembanyama. You pick him. Next question is from Risley, I think, on Twitter. Do you think number 7, Killian Hayes, will reach his full potential with the Pistons, or will he flourish better on another team? Ever since last year, I've been able to believe that Killian Hayes at his best, if he does ever develop and reach his best, it won't be with the Pistons. It'll be another team. So I'm going to say another team if it does end up planning out for him. If the Pistons get the number 1 pick, what will you do? Has to be something crazy. Listen, I'm not going to do this with you guys again this year because last time you guys tried to make me shave my beard, and when I went to do it, my now wife almost killed me. So I'm not going to say anything yet. I'm going to wait. And then also you guys try to make me do that chip, what is it? The one chip challenge, the super hot chip, whatever. And then I started seeing people talk about they were going to the hospital over it. You guys were trying to put me in the hospital and stuff. So I'm going to wait until we can find something that is crazy, yes, but it's not insane. Okay. Like that's not going to hurt. Okay. So we'll wait out on that. We're not going to even talk about that until the lottery comes around. So let's just pause on that. And then this is a question I was talking about that in the beginning of the episode when I said I could actually turn this into a full episode. And I really want to save it for then. So this one's from Obi Floppin on Twitter. It says NBA announces they have expanded and the expansion draft is tomorrow. But this time each team only gets to protect 1 player. Who do you protect, and who are some players you would have your eye on in an expansion draft, considering whoever it is you do protect? Now, I'm not going to answer this question. Actually, I'll answer the one protection. It's obviously Cade Cunningham. But I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm actually looking forward to making that like an episode I do in the offseason next year. I want to have like some of our favorite guests, Bryce, and someone else on the podcast, and do like an expansion draft. Have you just protect few players from the Pistons, and each one of us go how we would go about an expansion draft. That's a really cool idea. I'm going to be doing that next offseason. So I appreciate the question, but I don't want to dive too much into it because, again, like I said, it's something I actually want to make a full episode out of next in a few months. So I'm going to save it for there. But if you have to protect 1 player, obviously it's Cade Cunningham. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys all for sending in all those questions. If you guys want to hear your guys' question on the podcast, send it in over at Twitter, at Kuka Hill. Tweet at me, DM me, or comment underneath the YouTube videos. Those are all the best ways to get your question on here. Until next time, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for making the Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Go Pistons. Stay safe, everybody. And peace out.